considering the school is a small school, it's a small community, tight-knit group of kids, but the opportunities that Fern Hill provides the children is incredible.
I'm Glenn Herbert, and I'm an editor with Our Kids. We're speaking with insiders from Canada's leading private schools to gain insights into their programs, culture, traditions, and leadership. This includes insights from parents, alumni, and administrators. This is the Our Kids Insider Perspective.
Yeah, well, the process, we had a list of criteria that we were hoping to find in a future school for our children. At the time, we only had one child, and now we have three. But I think some of the answers would be similar to most parents. We wanted to find a school with small class sizes, a nice location, a nice campus, a nice building, nice facility. And that was sort of our initial criteria. We had never, neither my wife or I had been to a private school, so it's not like we had much past experience to use for ourselves. But those were the initial things that we wanted to originally try to find. So when we started our research, that's what we originally started to do. And then, of course, once you start seeing a bunch of schools, then you start to see a lot more things that maybe differentiate one from the other. And then, you start to create a subsequent secondary list of things that you were looking for. So that was initially our first criteria for finding a school. So smaller class sizes, nice facility, location, and relative closeness to where we lived. We didn't want our kids going on a hour and a half bus ride to school and back. So that was the initial criteria. Well, all of our kids started at a very young age, so basically preschool. So that was the first. We started with one, and then two, and then three, and subsequently now I've got one in university, I've got one in high school, and one still at Fern Hill. So I have an interesting broad spectrum of ages and their experiences, and also seeing how the legacy of primary education or elementary education, whatever you want to call the word, how that progresses through high school and ultimately into university, and how some of those younger years sets a foundation for their development going forward. I mean, obviously, as a parent, you have a certain list or expectations of what you're hoping a child gets out of school. Of course, that's as an adult's perspective looking back. For a child, it can be completely different. But we were just saying a while ago, because my son now, like I said, my oldest is in university, and for him to still reminisce about his earlier years at school and still talking positively, and his experiences of what he thought his time at Fern Hill in particular, it was quite nice to see as a parent, because you would think that they wouldn't have some of those things click until much older in life. But the older two definitely still like to preach to the younger one to stay in elementary school. Don't ever leave. High school gets harder, university gets harder, but they both still talk fondly of the teachers they had back then and their times there, which as a parent, it is satisfying to see that, they figured it out much quicker than we had anticipated they would. Well, like I said, originally when we were looking at schools, and you start to see how some schools differentiate themselves, whether it's a math-based program or it's an arts program or it's an athletic program. We wanted a school that considering we were sending our children at the age of 3 and 4, we wanted a school that was well-rounded, that had all those opportunities. Because to be fair, a 3-year-old child, you have no idea what their future interests will be, what innate skills they develop, or what they want to pursue going forward. So we wanted a school that would have a balanced approach to education and provide them with as many opportunities as possible. So Fern Hill fit that fit because they have an arts, they have an arts side to them, and where you can learn play musical instruments, you can play in a band, you can do a school musical. They have art shows. They take art classes, and then you have the traditional math and science-based program. You have languages, French and Mandarin, um, and then outdoor education, field studies, things like that. So for us, it was a well-rounded approach to the education. But the thing that we have since subsequently looking back, which we would not necessarily have thought in the beginning, one of the interesting things was their public speaking and their confidence in public speaking. That's one thing that we didn't necessarily think of at the time, but looking back was probably one of the more positive things that we've noticed. And that starts very early with Fern Hill in terms of their assembly program, where every morning the kids, the class takes turn in leading assembly for the week, and kids are standing up in front of the school body and they are speaking to the school body about whether it's the news, jokes, things like that. It's amazing to see young kids as early as 3 or 4 having the nerve to stand up in front of a school body and speak. And for us, looking back, that's probably one of the highlights, because now we see our 2 older children who are comfortable in uncomfortable situations, or meeting new people, or in terms of university, speaking in front of 100+ students about their opinions or their beliefs. And that all started at Fern Hill from a very young age, doing the public speaking. And to be fair, that was not something that was on our radar in the very beginning. Never really thought about it. But to have that skill set, it's a hard thing to teach a child, I think. You can teach kids to add and subtract, but to have the confidence to do public speaking and to stand in front of strangers and speak. And again, that's further encouraged at Fern Hill, either through getting up and playing a musical instrument, even though you're brand new and you can barely make a note on the trumpet, you're confident enough to stand up and give it a go. And if it doesn't go well, that the community and the school is there to encourage the child and not make them feel uncomfortable. And then again, through the school plays, obviously pre-COVID, but the school plays, to be able to get up there and sing on a stage in front of your peers. I know my wife and I would never have done that in our schooling. So that, I think, has been one of the highlights looking back, is the public speaking and confidence in themselves to get up in front of a crowd of either known people or unknown people and speak. I think that's probably the one thing looking back has been one of the highlights for us. Well, to be honest, like I said, we've now been at Fern Hill for this is our 16th year at Fern Hill, so it's been a very, very long time. And honestly, yeah, no school is perfect, but to be fair, I can't really criticize them for much, or really give them a lot. I mean, the only, I guess not necessarily a negative, but one of the things that's a positive is also a negative, is that it is a small community. It's a small school. So I guess one could argue that if it was bigger, there would be more opportunity, I guess, for greater things if they had a bigger school body. But of course, if you have a bigger school body, then you lose some of that unique characteristics of the school being a small school in a sense. So in one sense, I guess it's its greatest asset, and sometimes it can be a negative, that sometimes for some parents, perhaps it's the body is too small. But for us, we really can't criticize much about Fern Hill. It's been a fantastic school. If it hadn't have been, we wouldn't be there for 16 years. Well, to be fair, we were newbie parents. It was our 4-year-old or 3-year-old. I can't remember how old he was when he started, but we went in with, I'm not going to say limited expectations, but we went in with a lot of unknown. I mean, like I said, we'd never had a child before. And of course, the first one's a bit of an experiment, but then you start getting multiples, it becomes a lot easier. So for the first one, I guess it was just the overwhelming experience of, oh my gosh, I've got a child now in school. Um, and, for my wife, especially that first day of dropping them off. But our oldest from day one was like, see you, mom, I'm going to school. And that was a great feeling to see the kids. And to be fair, uh, all three of the children, they've always been excited to go to school. Maybe not so much once they hit high school, but definitely in the elementary years, they were definitely excited to get up and go to school, which for us was a great feeling, because how many people get to experience their children excited to get up to go to school? It's definitely probably not the norm, but all three of ours loved getting up and going to school. As they got older, maybe a little less, but for their Fern Hill years, I sure never had an issue in getting them to school. School values. There's school values. Well, there's definitely this gentle enforcement of empowerment, of encouraging kids to reach their full potential, whatever that may be. So if you're going to be a future musician, then encouraging them to, continue pushing towards becoming better at music. Or if they're in later interests as math or science or whatever the issue is. So I think their empowerment of the kids, and they're instilling leadership in the children. Again, from a public speaking perspective as well, the confidence. And I think that is where a lot of kids lack today, is that empowerment and the confidence to seek out whatever it is you want to seek out. Again, whether it's um, being a musician, being a mathematician, whatever, science minded, whatever the case may be. And I think they do it really well, and they do it sort of subconsciously with the kids. The kids don't realize that that's what's being uh, instilled in them, right? And that, at the same time, it's a family atmosphere. And and the nice thing too for the kids is that that family atmosphere where all the kids know each other. You know, uh, if you're in the, well, pre-COVID, but when you're in the mall with your kids, and mine are now in grade 8, and there's some great, some 4-year-old or 5-year-old who reaches out and yells my son's name, and it's like, how do you know that kid? And he's like, oh yeah, he's in kindergarten, and that is great from a parent's perspective, to know that these kids know everybody in the school. Again, because it's a small school, they have that ability, and I think that's a great characteristic for some of these kids to have. Is to be able to have that family environment where everybody knows everybody. Also, they have their own friends group within that, but they know everybody, and it's a comfortable environment where the kids feel confident to take a risk, whether that is to get up and tell a joke, or they take a risk to go out and try to dance, or whatever they're doing. And it's great to see that confidence in those kids, and that's all part of the program at Fern Hill, and they do it without even knowing they're doing it. Well, to be fair, I mean, the school's only as good as its teachers. I mean, you can have a great facility, you can have a great location, um, but it's only as good as its teachers. And so we have found great teachers at Fern Hill. Again, having subject specific teachers is definitely an asset as all also that we really liked with Fern Hill. So you have a person with a math background teaching math, and you have a French teacher who knows French and vice versa. So from that perspective, you have subject specific teachers. So one, those teachers are interested in that subject, so they have that passion, as opposed to a teacher that's really language geared but got stuck teaching gym. Um, so you get that passion in all those teachers, and that shows in also the level of the kids' enjoyment of the school. So for us, like I said, school's only as good as its teachers, but the teachers are great. Can't criticize those teachers, and they go above and beyond for the children, well beyond what you would ask a teacher normally to do. And especially during COVID, those teachers went above and beyond what the school asked them, whether it was providing extra help on their own dime, on their own time, working from home, while also trying to manage their own children and their own lives. I think COVID in particular illustrated the length that teachers will go to ensure that our kids have the best opportunity they possibly can, given the chaotic time that they were stuck in. A couple things. Obviously, different children have different experiences, and our oldest definitely thinks fondly of, obviously, again, pre-COVID. So his experience was a tad bit different than our youngest, but with Fern Hill being part of the Round Square program and being able to travel internationally, and do trips like that, our oldest was able to do a trip to Belize, a place that probably he would never have been able to have gone without that program. It's not certainly like we would pick Belize per se to go on a family trip. And of course, he went on and went with teachers, but went without parents. And that was his real first experience of relative independent travel without parents. And he still talks about that trip to this day. So that was a great experience for him. And also working with local school kids of similar age and seeing the differences of opportunities that they have experienced versus what children of that country experience. So for his perspective, I'd say it would be that Belize trip. Also, too, he highly speaks highly of his. They did both of our kids did the school plays. I mean, if you had asked my wife and I when we signed him up, would our oldest in particular be the type of kid that would get up on stage dressed up in a costume and sing, I would have said absolutely not. There's no way he would ever do that. And yet did that for, I think, 3 or 4 years that he was able to, and still speaks fondly of that experience. And again, would definitely not have been something we would have thought, definitely would not have been something that my wife or I would ever wanted to have done in school. But probably, to be fair, probably would not have felt comfortable to want to do that in front of a school body. But since they're so encouraged and so part of that family group, they didn't feel threatened to want to try and do that, which is fantastic. So for him, it would be the school trip and the Belize and the school play. For our other son, he likes a lot of the sports activities that they did, the floor hockey tournaments and soccer tournaments that they did, and the frisbee tournaments. Being a very athletic minded child. So he speaks fondly of that. He had no interest in wanting to do the round trips. So he never did that, but round square trips. But for him, it probably would be the sports. And he talks highly of the teachers. He has a couple of teachers that he speaks fondly of. And that's another great thing for us, is that when my wife and I look back on our child experience, and we can probably think of one or two teachers throughout our entire educational years where we think highly of one or two teachers that made an impact for us. But our kids, they've got about 10 of them, and to have that many and still talk about them to this day, I think is nice to hear from a parent's perspective. And then our youngest, unfortunately for COVID, that has squashed a lot of the things that he would have been interested in doing, but unfortunately, you can't do those things. And that's part of life as well for kids, is learning that life throws hardballs at you, and you've got to work around them. So I'll say that the youngest one, he hasn't been able to do as much as that he would have liked, but he speaks highly of, the sports that he was able to do over the last 2 years, and just being with his friends really at this point in time. I wouldn't say that you have, one type of family or another at the school. There's a vast degree of differences in terms of the people that go to Fern Hill, and to be fair, for our perspective, it's more about the child experience than the parent experience. But there is yeah, a PTA, I guess what you would call it. There's a parents association that helps with creating some of the events that the kids get to do. There's a Christmas tuck shop where the kids can go in and buy gifts on their own, and that's all run through the parents association. So the parents are obviously actively involved. I mean, we've all taken a vested interest, either financially, to see that your children reach whatever potential they can. So you have similar like-minded parents, and then some parents are different as well. And it can be the school where you can be as involved as you want, or you can be not as involved as you want, and that's okay too. And but you have a cross section of different types of kids that are going to that school, and not everyone is the stereotypical um, family that some people assume private school children are. I would say, again, the amount of opportunities that, despite the fact that Fern, well, not necessarily negative, but considering the school is a small school, it's a small community, tight knit group of kids, but the opportunities that Fern Hill provides to children is incredible, in our opinion. I mean, considering its size, where else are you going to be able to learn? Well, French is obviously a curriculum, part of the curriculum, but you can learn French, you can learn Mandarin, you can learn a musical instrument, you can play in a band, you can play jazz bands, you can participate in art shows. Um, for us, a great part as well is the fact that the school is always reinventing itself. It's always trying to meet to the times. Because when we first started, there was no Mandarin, there was no, um, there wasn't an outdoor. What's the word I'm looking for? There isn't a field studies program, right? And over time, they have created those programs to try and stay with the times. So, and now I would say to our friends, where is your child going to be able to go to school, go foraging into a forest where you're learning field studies, connecting with nature live? You're not watching a video, you're not reading a book. You're flipping over rocks, looking at worms, understanding what worms do and what their relation is to the ecosystem, especially now too with the challenges of the future that we have in terms of environmental, that these kids are creating a connection to nature at such an early age. And again, the school has a bird banding program, and completely foreign to my wife and I, but where would you get the opportunity for a young child to participate in taking birds and holding them and banding them and then releasing them? The kids come home and they're all excited because they caught some giant bird. And kudos to the teacher that has to pull out a crow and hold that. Kudos to them, because it's not something I'd want to do. But and the kids learning those things again subliminally, without them really understanding what they're learning. And it connects to later on, where my wife and I still talk about it. But we were walking the dog one day, and this is the kids were young, but the kids say, "Hey, there's a such and such bird in that tree, and it's a female bird, and from what it looks like, it's quite plump and it's got good feather." And of course, we looked at one another as if to say, "I have no idea what he's talking about," but it sounded impressive. So the ability for a child to be exposed to so many things, and then school plays, musicals, the sports, the ability basically to provide your child with a well-rounded education. And, again, pre-COVID, but the ability to travel internationally and having language specific teachers, um, where you can have, like I said before, have a math teacher teach math, a language teacher teach language. And from a parent's perspective as well, which we haven't touched on, but the ability for that teacher to teach to that level. So if your child is strong in math, then you can be encouraged and go further. But you may struggle in language, so they can spend a little bit more time on language. That ability, whereas other classes or classrooms, they have to teach at the majority of the level, and if you are struggling or you excel, you're sort of left behind. So as a parent, being able to tell the parent that, I think is quite incredible. It's more advice as opposed to searching for the school. I mean, like all the parameters that we were looking for, we found, right? That's why we stayed. We found a great school. It's on a great piece of property. It's surrounded by a forest. It has all of the things that we were looking for. But I think the biggest advice to parents or that I would have, is to, whether it's Fern Hill or it's not Fern Hill, pick the school that best aligns with your philosophy and what your hopes are for your children, and then give the school the freedom or the independence to carry out that philosophy, right? Put trust in the school, and you'll be happy with the outcomes. And I think that would be something that would be been nice to have known at the beginning. But in terms of your normal criteria for looking for a school, I think everybody knows what they're particularly looking for, and hopefully they find that. But for me, I think, giving the school the ability to carry out its vision on its own, and allowing it to move in that direction, your child will hopefully then achieve whatever full potential that child has. And then the interesting thing as a parent too, looking back, having 3 children, each child is different. And although you raise them the same, same expectations, they reach different potentials or different interests. And you can end up with 3 different, you can have children going down 3 different paths or 3 different opportunities, right? And the ability for the school or allowing the child the ability to achieve those goals while in the bubble of Fern Hill in particular, allowed a lot of that to happen.
For more information about this school, you can visit their profile at ourkids.net.